Let's carry on under a bit of time pressure, but we will look at the differentiation now, because the question is, what about the open landscape birds if we re-wet the muddy plains and we create hedges? Are there problems? And we will have a team from, I don't dare say, Michael Eick, who's here, and he brought someone along online, hoping the line works now. And you see the director of the Academy for Conventional Protection in Baden-Württemberg. He works at the University of Wohnheim. You are a scientist, and you're going to tell us whether we can have so many hedges. And online, I think we've just heard her, Karin Kilchling-Hink. She is a biologist and a teacher in bird protection, and she carried on in a project protecting the bird. Can you hear us? Yes, we can, and I hope you can hear me as well. Okay, so let's welcome Karin and Sören. This is their applause.
Well, hello, or moin, as they say here in North Germany. First of all, thank you very much for allowing the two of us to speak here. We don't want to spoil your good humor as the party crashers here, but we would like to help you have a differentiated look or view at the hedge and what role the hedges can play as scarecrows is something that we want to explain to you. It wasn't so easy to find a scarecrow. The former Miss Bavaria made herself available after some convincing. At least I'm stable, so Karin will share this presentation with me. Let's start with a good piece of news. As some heard from the news, the partridge is the bird of the year 2026. Is that a reason to celebrate? Well, usually not. When a bird becomes bird of the year, it's usually not a good sign. And I can tell you, those are my data. For 30 years nearly, I've been counting partridges, and there were nearly 140 couples when I started counting, and it went down to 10. It ends in 2017. So you see a crash within 25 years, decline of more than 90%. And no matter what is the turtle dove, the partridge, etc., it doesn't matter. They all decline. And there are several reasons why this happens, why they decline. First of all, more intensification of agriculture, whatever you can understand by this. There are many effects that play into this. The use of pesticides above all. Restriction of crop rotations, increased maize cultivation for biogas plants, heavy fertilization, so eutrophication, and thereby loss of landscape elements such as fallow fields or margins, etc. Fields are used all the way to the margin of pathways. But it's not the loss of hedges that is not so relevant for these three species I would like to present. They have different requirements. They need open fields or extensive meadows for the lopping, also wet meadows, but they also need fallow land and flowering areas. For all three, you can say they need structured open land, usually low vegetation, and all three avoid high elements in the landscape. So partridge, skylark, and lopping, and all the other open land birds avoid hedges. They need open landscapes. A look at the horizon, and they would like to have an open area of low vegetation. And I'll skip this here. This is a list of birds that stand for an agricultural area, and you can see that the partridge is used. But a skylark and a lapwing keep a distance. I showed you the decline of the partridge, and I picked two areas. Near Stuttgart-Fellbach is my hometown. And there are two areas. This area in the north is about 51 hectares. The yellow lines are all hedges and woody areas. And in the 1990s, there was a lot of wood planted, and people would say, okay, that is exactly what it looks like. But the skylark would say, no, not so great. This is from 2000 to 2020. I compounded the data where we had at least 3 times a couple of skylarks or of these birds breeding there. The skylark only in the open area at in the north. The lapwing also existed there once, but they disappeared when the first woods were planted, the first copses were planted. So I have 2 pictures. This is where the lapwing used to breed, used to roost, and you can see this open area where you can only have one couple of skylarks. This is what it really should look like, is what people would say, but skylark and lapwing would say, oh, that's a bit tight for me. Now, these are 2 areas that are quite open, and I highlighted 2 hedges here. And the central area you can see is much more open, and in the margins you have some hedges. The area view is this. You can see the pink areas, and this is where the camera was. And now you can see where the partridge used to roost, and always 2 couples in the north, and it looks much more intensive with the skylark. Those are not pool data. They're from 3 different mappings, but in the center, they're all in the center. None of them near the hedges, near the margins. So, by way of summary, the partridge and the other birds need a manageable landscape, a landscape that they can see. They need vegetation that is no higher than 20 centimeters. That's a beer bottle. Anything that's higher, they don't even want to live there. And if there is any danger, they just hunker down. So this is the area. This is what the partridge needs, a landscape that it can oversee, and a little bit of vegetation so it can actually duck down. High plants are a threatening landscape feature because they are the place from where birds of prey can survey the lie of the land and can attack. So, just an estimate, if we plant 500 meters of hedges and we assume a 200-meter range for the partridge, how much landscape do we disable for these birds? It's a total of 20 hectares that are lost to those birds. So we have to look very closely at where we want to put hedges. Now, Katrin, are you live? Yes, I'm on. So you can assume control now. Karin, you're taking over control now, and now you have 10 minutes, and the clock is ticking. Can you see the presentation all right? I hear myself back again. It's a bit difficult now. Can you see the aerial view? The comparison between 68 and 24?
Ja, man sieht's, Karin.
Yes, we can see it, Karin.
Okay,
Perfect.
Also, ja, tatsächlich.
Right. Indeed. In the context of the partridge, the question is often raised, or the comment is made, that in the past there were many more partridges, but there were many more hedges as well. And I would like to use this aerial image to prove that that wasn't the case. That oftentimes there are many more woods and high trees today than in the past. And the left aerial picture from 1968, that was a time when there were many more partridges now, significantly more than today. And the current aerial picture, we don't have any partridges there anymore at all. And watch that smiley with the tree hedge to the left of it. You'll have to memorize that for a later slide. Now, I'll like to give you another example of this large number of copses. This is our model area of Tübingen. You can see the city of Tübingen and the city of Rothenburg, kind of in the center. And you can see the orange areas. Those are open land areas where we implement measures to promote the partridge. But what you can also see, all these many dashes and dots, those are all hedges and copses that we've collated in the context of this project. It was 494 woodlands, basically, and hedges, with a total length of 70 kilometers over an area of 14 square kilometers. And the picture on the right with the 200 with those red spots, these are the 200-meter distances, because these field birds keep this distance from the hedges. Now just put a 200-meter circle around those hedges, and in the background you can see the orange areas, so basically open land area. But if all these hedges grow to a greater height, then these species have very little space left. Luckily, the situation is such that we do a lot of hedge management in this area, so it's not as bad, but this would be the situation if there was no management of the hedges. And it not only affects the county of Tübingen, it affects all of Baden-Württemberg, even all of Germany. So the wooded areas is the only category of area other than built-up areas that have increased in Germany, all at the expense of open land. And at the same time, in the open land, a lot of interventions were made. So we don't have fewer, but more trees, and above all high trees in the landscape. And at the same time, the birds in the agricultural landscape that are in the open landscape that are severely affected. So we must not plant new woods in open land areas that are still available, and that those that are in place already need to be continuously managed in order to reduce the height of the woods. That is the situation of the birds in the agricultural space. At the same time, we have many planning instruments and requirements that require and promote many the planting of new woods in open areas. And that makes us worried about the open land. The most important objective for open land species is to open up the landscape again. I pointed out the smiley to you, indicating the location from where I took those two pictures earlier on, remember? And you can see a tree hedge previously, and on the right-hand side, the same situation, but the standards were removed, i.e. the higher trees, and the bushes were left, and you can see the landscape opens up again. It gives an entirely different impression. You can see it beyond this hedge, and how much more impressive must that be for a ground roosting bird who's at the height of a beer bottle, as was said earlier. We are often, or again and again, we are accused of thinking of the open field species only, but you forget about the hedge roosters. But in fact, the hedge roosters, most of them, prefer lower hedges. They prefer this kind of hedge with a large margin because there's a lot of food there, particularly insects, large insects in particular. And these tree hedges harbor usually the unthreatened species, such as blackbirds. But they don't need our support now. It's the other species that do. And the open fields species are not discouraged by this kind of low hedge. Once you've reduced the heights of these hedges, we have low hedges that need to be maintained as such, but that is a never-ending story. These hedges need to be managed again and again every 3 to 4 years, depending on what plants you have, what the weather is like, what the soil quality is. It's very time intensive. And if you've ever managed such a hedge, you know how much work it is to take out all the cuttings from this and to take them away. And then there's a high effort involved in planning with the owners, authorities. You also have to test the practicability. Can you drive in there with a trailer in order to remove the cuttings? How can you utilize all the cuttings? And I hope that I'll get a lot of information tomorrow from tomorrow's Congress. Also, the maintenance of this margin, which is so important for many species, is also very complex and laborious. And if we maintain a hedge for a target species, it will only work for a very small number of species because there's so many of those. I have a hedge here for the partridge, a very low hedge with a lot of gaps, a lot of high grasses and slow-growing thorny bushes that can be covered by grass, but and partridges prefer this, but to maintain this status is very difficult. We only manage to do that with the help of horses. And really, we should have to say, for every hedge that is planted, it would have to be ensured that this management will be maintained forever, or at least for as long as the hedge is around, because only then will it maintain its ecological value. And with earlier hedges, this hasn't always been done. Yes, we need more structure in the open land, but we need low structures, permanently low structures. So woody hedges are actually excluded for the open land. And there are low-growing structures, for instance, perennial flowering plants or low-growing grasses and also stubble fields and rural sites with open patches of soil. With these structures, these low structures, as has been proved by several scientific studies, we have a lot of knock-on effects for many other species, particularly insects. And these structures actually lead to an enrichment of biodiversity in open land. Now, how could we approach this as we think about how we can do? For instance, we could define the relevant open land areas with field birds species and use this for our biotope network planning. And it should be available to all planning departments. And it should be clear that in planning development areas that are relevant for field bird species, no trees, shrubs, no hedges can be planted, no alleyways, and no forestry plantations. And that woody species need to be intensively managed here in order to reduce the woody species, and that we need to put other plants in place, such as the blossoming, perennial flowering species. So we have 5 take-home messages here. The open country breeding field birds are the bird species with the most dramatic declines. These field birds avoid tall hedges in order to maintain an overview. Hedge breeders also prefer low hedges, and because it's such high maintenance, the motto should be hedge management before hedge planting. And in the open land biotope network, there are many alternatives to hedge planting, such as the open land species that also promote other endangered species. And I hope that in many places with open land, we opt for the right path forward in order to promote biodiversity in the open land. So thank you very much for your attention and for allowing us to give this presentation here today. Well, thank you very, very much, Karin and Michael. All right, now we need a lot of time for discussion because we need to coordinate a lot of measures and questions. So we have another 4 minutes available, so let's ask very quickly. Maybe, well, we have Megan and Robert here as well, and through translation you learned. We heard earlier more hedges, wider hedges, climate protection, that's good. And now we heard fewer hedges, lower hedges. Can we kind of harmonize these two things? So, or could we hear some suggestions? Okay, yes, we'll take the questions to dinner, okay? Megan?
Und eure Fragen, Ihre Fragen. That was fascinating, thank you. I completely agree with the idea that we should be restoring and maintaining our existing hedges first. I think that, to me, is the first priority. We need to make sure that our existing hedges do not get lost through lines of trees or overwork because of the value inherent within them. When it comes to squaring diversity that likes open spaces and diversity that likes more enclosed spaces, I think we're going to have to work this out through more research and understanding. I think looking at the types of hedges is really important, particularly where we put trees, I think is really important, particularly for predator perches. And what parts of the hedge are necessary, you know, what parts are beneficial and what aren't. I mean, plenty of ground nesting birds quite like the low cover, absolutely. And it could be that in study areas, the big hedges often lose the low cover. And it might not necessarily be the presence of the hedge, but the absence of the cover as well. There's a lot of research by the Game Wildlife Conservancy Trust as well. I don't know if you're familiar with that in England, and I think it's certainly important to look at the balance and which aspects, because of course hedges are not one habitat, they're a wonderful mixture of all of them, and wondering where we can find that compromise in areas that do need to be more sensitively appreciated.
Vielen Dank, Megan. Ist hinten auch eine Frage?
Well, thank you very much, Megan. Is there another question there? We could actually take that. My name is Vera Tüsse of the Thünen Institute, and I also do hedge research here. So thank you very much for the presentation that you presented data covering 30 years. I have several questions. First of all, I'd like to know what areas do you refer to? Would you say that is true for your region, for South Germany, or would you say those are results that can be applied to all of Germany? Even though we have a different agricultural structure here, then I'd like to know what area is affected here, and if you plant new hedges, if new hedges are planted, what distance would you find acceptable? Well, the results are representative. Of course, we have that. We did the research in Germany. But I'm sure that's the same in all over Germany, where we have open land, where these are the target species, of course. So we have to have a differentiated look at hedges and hedge planting. So it's probably better to maintain existing hedges rather than planting new ones, and use different ways of networking biotopes in areas that don't have hedges. So we have a differentiated landscape. So, for instance, in hilly areas, hedges may be appropriate because you don't have these open land areas in any case. So we need to differentiate it, and so we can combine these. So some landscapes where in certain landscapes you need to have hedges, and others you should avoid them. Well, I don't know if I'm promising too much. It's a pity that we can't take a look at the landscapes anymore. BaumLand might summarize all of this, so we don't leave here confused as to whether we should plant hedges or not. So it's always a question of the target species. Okay, Franziska Geber, University of Göttingen. I would like to broaden the view a bit, because you represented here the lobby of the open field bird species. But we also have to consider the other targets, restricting climate change, whether we can actually consider the protection of a specific species here. We want to cool down the landscape. We want to stop soil erosion. We want to protect other species as well. So I think we have to take that into consideration. So we're not talking of deserts or steppes. Okay, that's where those birds come from the steppes. But they are open land species. It's not only these three. It's a large number of species. That's a huge pool of species that we are just using like sand that we're trying to hold in our hands. And we managed to do a lot to stop that decline over the last few years. And we just need to do some things to maintain these species. For instance, wet meadows, that is where the lapwing feels at ease, and they've been lost all over the place except for maybe North Germany. And now, unfortunately, this speaker is not using the microphone. Well, maybe we need to reduce pesticides more than the hedges. Well, yes, that's something else that I would like to ask. It almost looks like the hedges are responsible. Can't we maintain the hedges and the skylarks? because the areas around the hedges were more friendly for open field birds. Yes, that's true. But if we take the wrong measures within the wrong landscape, so we need to maintain the open land, and I have to make sure that if I have such a structure in the landscape, what are the target species, what is the landscape, and then we have to define the right measures for these species and landscapes. Okay, so we brought them back together. Leon said, okay, that's it. Thanks, Leon, because that is right. I could continue taking questions for another 20 minutes because I know there's a lot of knowledge in this room, so I'd like to make room for Julius. Thank you. Okay, again, thank you very much for the presentation and the discussion that this triggered. So another glass of rosehip chutney to prepare for the winter. That's German superfood, as you wish. Okay, thank you. Well, Karin will get one by mail as well. Thank you very much, Michael. And here's the team from the bird nest. We have to let them come in. We will have